So this comparison is really what I'm using as a foundation to understand why, for people to understand why I believe Path needs a rework and a possible shift in what type of character we will call him. And we'll get started with that. So we're going to start with our passive comparison, and we're going to do Path versus Valk. And I'm not going to read this word for word, but I'm going to explain my thoughts on Pathfinder versus Valk and their passives. So we know Valk's passive allows her to make, it allows her to just use her jets. And her jets, in my opinion, as a passive, is similar to what Pathfinder needs to use his tactical for. So jetpacking with Valk may not get you as far as a grapple with Pathfinder, but it is very similar, which to me doesn't make sense for her passive to be a movement based ability that allows her to reposition herself the way Pathfinder has to use his grapple. So an example for this could be if I'm on World's Edge and there might be like a large rock or some type of like structure in front of me. If I want to quickly get up the rock as Pathfinder, I will have to use my tactical, which may run me a 14-second cooldown. Valk, she can just use her passive and jet up. Granted, depending on the height, she may have to use all of her fuel to get up there, but she still can move up there and transverse around the map without necessarily like using up all of her fuel. So in some situations where a Pathfinder may need to like grapple off of a house or he need to reposition quickly, he will have to sacrifice his tactical in order to move somewhere that Valk could use without sacrificing her tactical, which in my opinion doesn't necessarily, it's not with every character, it's not about it being balanced, but I believe that it should be some type of like fairness or some type of equity involved in what it costs to use movement. And for Valk is her jetpack. And I think that Pathfinder, his passive really locks him in a weird situation where his passive is only active when he scans a beacon. And I'll talk more about this, but to sum it up, in a game, a regular match, depending on what level you're at competitively, you're not going to be scanning the map. Well, scanning the beacons as you're not going to scan a lot of beacons, in my opinion. Maybe you might scan a beacon two to four times and 4 max, but I think the max you can reduce Zipline's cooldown, which is his ultimate, is to 60 seconds. So I think you will have to scan like six beacons or 6. You have to do 6 scans because I think every time you scan it reduces it by 10 seconds. I may be wrong, but either way, on an average game as a Pathfinder, you're not really going to be hitting scans that much. And for him to make use of his passive, I don't think that that's fair for him to have to put yourself out, in the open to scan a beacon in order to reduce an already fast ultimate. The cooldown, not the cooldown, the load time for Zipline is 120 seconds, so 2 minutes, which is, in my opinion, still very fast as an ultimate. Charges really, really fast. So losing like 10, 20 seconds off that is very marginal, makes a marginal difference in my opinion. So I'll definitely have to give it to Valk, like as far as like, a passive ability. Like your passive is a jetpack versus Pathfinder. You have to do something. You have to scan. You have to put yourself in the open. You have to position yourself where other teams may be, where other scouting teams or recon characters may be, in order to get some type of value out of that. The next person I'll go to is Path. And with Path and Crypto, it to me it just once again, if we're gonna talk about scanning, right? Crypto can use his drone to scan. So you can be a crypto somewhere in like a bunker or somewhere hiding, and you can send your drone out to go scan to go scan and your passive allows your teammates to see what you're seeing. So for crypto, there's more value in his passive because he's giving his team information. When Pathfinder hits the scan and a crypto drone hits the scan, they both teammates get to see, both on both sides their teammates get to see, okay, this is where the next ring is going to be at. So there's really no difference in that. But if you're crypto, you don't have to put yourself in danger to get access to your passive. So again, as far as equity and passive, and like in their passive ability, crypto has an edge because one, scan is instant. For Pathfinder, if he's standing out there, it's going to take like maybe I think like 3 or 4 seconds, which is not a long time, but depending on what level you're at competitively, you can get beamed in 2 to 4 seconds. Like you can get beamed. Someone has a charge rifle, someone has a Kraber, if someone is good with a Spitfire, or if doesn't even have to be one gun, doesn't have to be gun dependent. It could be a whole team looking at you. If you're playing against a coordinated team or you're playing against a 2 stack or a 3 stack, if they see a Pathfinder scanning beacon, you can just get shot by a sentinel and then someone else might hit you a few times with a flatline and now you're instant knock. Compared to the crypto drone, yeah, if it gets destroyed, it's on a 40-second cooldown, but you're not knocked down and you didn't reveal the location of where you're at, because after you hit scan instantly, you can literally just recall drone. So I don't think there's not a lot of equity when we look at the passive. We do a passive comparison between Path and crypto. Now let's move to Path and Bloodhound. So Bloodhound's passive is his tracker, which allows him to get information, and I think it's good for the Bloodhound. It's good for the Bloodhound player, and if he's not on comms, I think intuitively, depending on the situation, you may end up following the Bloodhound on your team because he can ping, and his ping might tell you where to go. I've had games where the Bloodhound may not be on comms and he's using the enemy ping as a way to allow us to know where we need to head. So you don't have to be on comms. The information is good for you, and it can help you get to fights or help you avoid fights, gain intel. Versus again with Pathfinder, you just get a faster zip, and you have to put yourself in a vulnerable situation in order to get information. Granted, if we do take the comparison of, okay, Bloodhound has to scan beacon too. Yeah, Path and Bloodhound can take damage while they're hitting scan, but when we look at just the passive alone, Bloodhound is getting information. That's any information in a battle royale is going to help you make a better decision for your team. For Pathfinder, getting a faster zip line is not helping you make a better decision. It can help you reposition, help you get somewhere, but how many zips are really being thrown up and being used in a match where it's going to provide that much value to your team? Like, I think zip is something that's very, very situational as far as value, and we'll talk about that once I get to their ultimate comparison. But right now, again, for a passive, Path has to put himself out there. He has to be vulnerable to damage. He has to kind of like be like a sitting duck, and his passive could potentially promote like beacon camping in order for him to get any utility out of his passive. Versus Bloodhound, he just has to exist, and the information will, if he walks around the map, the information will come to him.